It makes us feel very alone, isolated, different, less than. That's one of the things that also makes anxiety so hard to bear, is that so many of us not only struggle with anxiety, but we blame ourselves for being anxious. I know better. I shouldn't be anxious here. Oh, I teach my patients how to relax. I shouldn't be anxious. I'm a meditator. I shouldn't be anxious. And lots of people get feedback from other people. You're too anxious. You worry too much. You're too sensitive. You think too much, which, by the way, doesn't help anyone. And you can't stop doing this. In other words, if you're in sympathetic, you can't slow down your thinking. If you're in sympathetic, you're going to feel fight or flight very strongly. You can't, from a sympathetic place, dial that down. But what you can do is understand that you're hijacked into sympathetic, into a flight response, and that by shifting your attention in the ways that we described and we're going to continue to experiment with, lets you shift towards ventral. And just doing that is what helps move you from a confined, hijacked state in sympathetic or shutdown and lets you move to a more present, connected, available, socially engaged place where you can learn, where you can connect, where you can love, where you can laugh, because you have a deeper ability to access more of you. When I'm in a defensive state, I can only access the little part of me that's online when I'm really anxious or really angry or really shut down. Anxiety is totally normal. It's necessary for us to be able to survive and live. What polyvagal theory points out is that health is determined more from a flexible nervous system versus an inflexible nervous system. A rigid or inflexible autonomic nervous system, autonomic here refers to the part of the nervous system that controls our involuntary actions like breath, respiration, blood pressure, hunger, body heat, and also defensive states. That's what our autonomic nervous system is in charge of. And a rigid one has these particular impacts on the body. If our nervous system is dysregulated, our immune system is going to be dysregulated. So there's impaired immune functioning and a higher chance for inflammatory diseases. Often there are digestive problems, respiratory problems, chronic fatigue, depression, anxiety, social isolation, and loneliness. Does this feel familiar to anyone here who's felt this, right? This is part of the human experience. And this is what happens when our nervous system has become less flexible and more rigid. Benefits of a flexible autonomic nervous system include reduced inflammation, a better control and balance of immune response, lower risk of stroke, heart disease, diabetes, emotional regulation, not being so all over the place or labile or explosive, an increased capacity for friendship and connection, and I would add intimacy. We really can't access intimacy when we're either in sympathetic or shut down. We only can access emotional intimacy when we are in ventral. And when we're in ventral and have a flexible autonomic nervous system, we have resilience and we can access compassion. Again, if I'm frightened, if I'm terrified, I don't have much space to have sincere compassion. I'm too self-focused and terrified from my own lack of safety that I don't really have the bandwidth necessarily to be in touch with and offer that compassion deeply to others. So Going back to trauma for a minute. As I said before, right, trauma is induces a chronic tendency for nervous system dysregulation, meaning that your nervous system is going to tend to be rigid versus flexible, and it's going to prefer and spend most of its time in either sympathetic or shutdown, or bouncing between the two. And it's helpful to understand, right, that number one, anxiety isn't your fault. It's not. And that either there's genetic precedent for having your anxiety system turned on so sensitively, or there has been experiences in your life that have upregulated the anxiety response that has made it more intense and more often turned on, like trauma experiences will do that, or heavy experiences of loss. Any kind of trauma can impact our nervous system this way, whether it's in our past or in our present. And so this blaming of ourselves actually gets in the way of working with our own state of anxiety. Because then we not only have some anxiety, but we have some fight energy. Now we're having fight energy against ourselves. What's wrong with me? Why am I so stupid? Why can't I learn this? God almighty, I'm the slowest person on earth. And so now I'm anxious and angry. And I'm really far from being regulated or from accessing a ventral state. I'm just spinning. So when we blame ourselves, we're putting gas on the fire in some way.